If I may, I would like to welcome and introduce everyone and get started with our day. As I look out my own window, it looks a little chilly. You know, the snow is definitely falling, and I hear that we have more on the horizon. And if you are joining us from other areas besides St. Louis or the region, again, welcome. It's great to see each and every one of you in this space. So, furthermore, what I would like to do is to just click through a few housekeeping pieces. We are going to be graced today, starting off our inaugural speaker series for SBE21. And we're going to do this by utilizing our social media accounts. So if you have social media, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, please use the hashtag interact, speak openly, share, all of the things that you're hearing and also being a part of during today's opportunity with our guests. Now, again, SBE21 will be our hashtag, and we're going to kick off today with that series. Next, I'll come back on after we're done with a few opportunities to again connect. I'll speak openly about the Flip Job Fair, how it went, and then also our further opportunity in March. Then there's another interesting piece that I'll speak openly about again, about including a virtual punch card, which will be interesting. And then we'll adjourn with our time today. So with that being said, I would like to introduce Mr. Thad Faulkner. He is the head of school for the Wilson School. So as we come together for this conversation about diverse teachers benefiting all students, Claude Steele explains very clearly the negative outcomes of academic stereotypes in his book, Whistling Vivaldi, and how stereotypes affect us and what we can all do. Now, one of the most powerful ways schools can combat stereotypes is to recruit and support diverse teachers. So please join us today in an interactive session where we together will converse about how important the school culture is truly in promoting faculty diversity, as well as share the knowledge, experience, and aspirations about how all students can benefit from having diverse teachers. Again, please connect, jump into the chat, add in your questions and comments. I'll be the moderator of that piece as we're presenting, and we'll come together with those questions towards the tail end of our presentation today. So without further ado, I'm going to unshare my screen. So please give a big round of a virtual applause to Mr. Thad Faulkner.
Dr. Diggs, thank you so very much. And it's just a pleasure to have everybody with us today. And boy, it is a treat to be able to be at the comfort of our home or our office right now with this kind of weather going on outside. So please take good care of yourselves. So you have had the opportunity to look at the description, and let's kind of drill down, very quickly on, again, why are we together today? We share in so much for our young adults, for our adolescents, for our children, for our babies. Educators have to be student focused. That's why we do what we do, so that we can provide all that they need. However, I also am going to contend that great schools are teacher focused. Actually, let me say that differently. They have to be faculty focused, because greatest success happens when we're together. So thanks to each of you, current educators, maybe aspiring educators. I even see people who I had the opportunity to talk with on the Flip Job Fair. Goodness, what a pleasure to see folks back. This is a time where it's really challenging in our professional lives. And so what you're doing as a professional, thank you for what you're doing. This work is difficult. The method, the way that we're doing our work, but we know that our students need it. So thank you for that. And it's also an important time for us to do the work of diversity, equity, and belonging together. And so for that, I just want to say thank you to Dr. Fields and Dr. Diggs. This is powerful. Over 1,800 educators, actually close to 1,900 educators coming together. That's more than most school districts would have. And for that, I thank them, because if we have the pleasure of working together and doing and studying together, doing things that can help benefit our own schools and benefit our faculties, and of course benefit our faculties and our students, then it's powerful. So what they've started in Black Male Educators of St. Louis and in the State of Black Educators Symposium, it's something that really is is impactful in our community, and I thank them for doing that. I've only had the opportunity to speak with them on a couple occasions, but I'll tell you what, they are so impressive. I trust them as educators. I believe in them in their work, and I appreciate this strong network to benefit all students. So our description, as mentioned, was focused on students. You know, we should focus on students. We're educators who care about kids. And to benefit that, though, as I mentioned, we want to make sure that the narrative, though, includes teachers. The narrative includes faculty culture. I brought up those three things deliberately. You know, the students, that's where our work should always go to. Everything that we do in schools, all the decisions that we make have to funnel down and ultimately work to the betterment of the experience that our students have. The teacher and the full faculty, you know, they make the magic happen. There's no other way to say it. They deserve to be supported. They deserve to be valued. They deserve to be together. And then the school culture, you know, what is everyone's sense of belonging? And what are we doing to make sure that it's there? So with you today, as we drill down on those pieces, and of course, also invite you to this conversation, because the intent of today is to have a conversation. I don't know how you all felt about what we heard last week, but last week at the State of Black Educators Conference, there were so many powerful themes, one of which, of course, was about how do we make sure that we support people in our schools, and how do we make sure that we retain talent and teachers who are going to benefit our students. And so with that theme, we have an opportunity today to converse. You know, one of the powerful things I know we do at our school, and I'm sure you do this as well, you know, you go off somewhere and you learn something, you have a conversation, you're part of a conference, and then you have an opportunity to share together, to dialogue. And I hope that's what we'll do today. So I invite you into this conversation. Now, who's with you today? So now we've set the stage a little bit for the why, and now let's talk about who's with you. So today we have a couple people from Wilson School, and I'll share a little bit about them, as well as share a little bit about our school, and we'll dive into the topic. So myself, I'm the head of the school. Also, we have Andrea Ruth, who is assistant head of school. She's giving a wave. Hi, Andrea. We also have one of our faculty members, Melika Paneri, who is our director of educational technology and innovation. And you know, I want to thank them. They do work with me together so that we support our faculty, and we make sure that they have what they need, and that they feel that they can do and make the magic happen for our kiddos. Also with us, two individuals, very special friends, people who are just amazing, and I want you to definitely welcome them. And I hope that they really have an opportunity to share some of not only their work but their perspective. Mr. Keith Fuller, he's the director of diversity and inclusion at St. Louis Community College. Keith leads their diversity council. He's a member of our board, so he's been a longstanding member of the board on the Wilson School Trustees. He leads our committee on diversity, equity, and inclusivity. His professional background also includes working in the advancement space in higher ed, as well as having his law degree and being a practicing attorney. And right now, I know his work is really powerful at St. Louis Community College. Welcome, Keith. Hello, sir.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
We also have Dr. Sean Joe. He's a professor of social development at Washington University in St. Louis. Sean's the founder of the Race and Opportunity Lab, and he's a member of the John Burroughs School Board of Trustees. One of the outcomes of his Race and Opportunity Lab is homegrown STL, and he's representing that in his background. Way to go, Sean. And that is dedicated to improving the well-being of Black boys and young men, and reimagining the ways in which our communities support their health, academic attainment, employment, developmental opportunity, and transition into adulthood. For Black boys and young men to flourish in St. Louis, there must be a community or village invested in their individual needs. Homegrown STL invests in nurturing this St. Louis village and its continued forward development. Sean, thanks for being with us, my friend.
Glad to be here. My mic was off.
Appreciate it. Appreciate it. Very good. So with that, let me also share a little bit. So that's who's with you, and why are we connected, and where do we do our work? So we all are a part. Keith has graduates from our school. Sean has student at our school. And we, Andrea and Melk and I, have worked together for a long time at the Wilson School. The Wilson School is a small, private, independent school. We're located basically right west of Forest Park, right on the border of Clayton and St. Louis City. We're a school who has students from 3 years of age through 6th grade. We're a small school. We only are about 160 students. We have one class at every grade level, but we have 2 teachers in every classroom. We're a school who's been around for a long time, and I'm curious if anyone has ever heard of our school. We've been around for over 100 years, but we're one of those schools that it seems like people haven't heard and known about our school. Something I think that I also want to share in our work at Wilson is that we certainly understand that St. Louis has an amazing educational landscape. You have a lot of public offerings that are fantastic. You've got amazing parochial offerings. You've got these independent schools, of which we're one, that are wonderful choices as well. Our community has an amazing community of educators, and it serves our students and our families very, very well. And I hope that we can continue and advance this partnership that crosses, public schools and private schools. I think probably Sean might even mention at some point another opportunity that happens there, where educators can collaborate and connect. And I hope that this is one of those opportunities, certainly. So our work at Wilson School, what makes, why did we want to bring up this topic? Well, I'll be honest, this isn't a topic that I claim major expertise on, but like you all, I claim passion in it. I claim the idea that, care about kids, and I care about my teachers, and we want to do right by our families. And so I'll tell you a little bit about the demographics of Wilson School. So we have almost 40% of our student population claims people of color. We have about 20 to 25% of our population, one or both parents were born outside of the United States. So culture and linguistically, we're diverse in that regard. We each year, we hover very, very close to 50-50 in a gender balance and make up, a variety of religious representations and personal preference representations are in the school. Socioeconomically, we have about almost 45% of our students are on some form of financial aid. So there is a level of socioeconomic diversity at our school. One of the things that we aspire to is that our faculty should also represent, what we're trying to, our student population, as well as the population in St. Louis. And that's where we're trying to put a lot of attention. We haven't arrived yet. We haven't arrived in our student demographics. We haven't arrived in our faculty demographics. We're about 25% person of color in our faculty, and that includes African American, it includes Asian, it includes Native American, Middle Eastern, Latino. However, we are almost, we're over 60%, Caucasian women teachers. We are approaching 20% male on our faculty, about 18%. So we have a level of diversity, but we don't claim to have arrived. We know that there's work to do, and we want that work to happen at our school, and we want that work to happen at other schools as well. So that's a little bit about our school, a little bit about the demographics, as well as our work. So let's frame our conversation, and let's dive right in. So let's talk a little bit about some of the things that we consider in how does diverse faculty benefit all students. Well, you could look at a variety of work. We called out, Claude Steele's work on stereotype threat and how that can be impactful to people of color, how that can be impactful to women going through their education, how that can be impactful to Hispanic students, all of the things that he pulls out in that expectations and participation and the way that the teacher interacts can reinforce or can break down stereotypes. You have Julie Lythcott-Hames, who talks about her own experience, and she talks passionately about the stories that she had growing up, and that really, in some regards, it might not have been until she was at Stanford when a teacher truly acknowledged her for who she was and made her feel valued in the classroom. That just hurts. That just hurts. You have the stereotype threat that exists. We know also that idea of academic outcomes. What happens when students see themselves in the curriculum? What happens when students see themselves in their mentor and their teacher? We know that the idea of discipline can be handled differently. We know that that's such an important area where kids need equitable treatment, and diversity of faculty can help to ensure that is. We know that the lens by which you come about being a professional is super important. It's very different at times to have people of different backgrounds, of different races, of different experiences, of different ages to talk about what their lens is with social justice, as well as other curricular areas. We got to make sure that our students are comfortable with their authentic self. They've got to have that space. They've got to have that openness to be their authentic self. And we need teachers who make sure that they do that. And they have to be seen. They have to be seen for their whole self, for their authentic self. People shouldn't only be seen because there's a preference in the room, that there's bias that allows us to include a preference. They have to be seen. All of us, all of our students have to be seen. And quite honestly and selfishly, we need to motivate our students to become the next generation of teachers. I think that we all understand that there's a shortage of teachers. There's a concern about retaining teachers. The data points to teachers leaving the profession in just huge numbers by year 5. And if you're a person of color, those percentages are even higher. And we need to make sure that we reverse that, and we need to motivate that. So we have a lot of topics that we can drill down on, a lot of things that we can explore, a lot of important reasons why having a diverse faculty benefits all of our students. And I want to invite you to this conversation. I want to make sure that we dive into this. I want to give our speakers an opportunity to share something as well. And I want to make sure that we have some time together and talk about these important things for our kids. So let me pause and let me invite anyone else from the panel to add on, to share, to take this conversation in a way that can be beneficial.
Would you like to go first, Dr. Joe, or would you like me to jump in? Thank you. Welcome, everybody. I'm excited to be here. I want to thank the Black Male Educators of St. Louis. I enjoyed being a participant at the symposium and really thought the Flip Job Fair was incredible. And I want to thank you for the Black Educators Speaker Series that kicks off now. One of the things that I thought about as Thad was providing a description for the day was that word stereotype. And actually the image that came to me was not one from the education arena. It was the two young children I saw a few weeks ago. One was dressed similar to former President Barack Obama, and one was dressed similar to former First Lady Michelle Obama. And I just thought how that sets the tone for what we're talking about today, in that children very often need to see the visual cue as to what they can be, and how that spread around the world, and how people took joy in seeing the hope that that expression in their dressing gave to the world. So I look forward to drilling down on this issue of stereotyping. I also, in our planning conversation, thought about when was the first time that I saw a teacher of color. And for me, it was sixth grade. And I've been around education, in and around it, for all my life. My mother taught English in the city of St. Louis public schools for over 20 years. And then when we moved to University City, she continued to teach seventh grade English at the U City School District for over 20 years. And I thought of all the educational institutions that I have been connected with, not only the University City School District, but then after graduating from U City, I attended Morehouse College in Atlanta, Georgia, where I honestly don't really recall a white teacher. It seems like every teacher I had was African American, Indian, or African. And then going to the University of Missouri, where I had pretty much a mixture, as I recall, for law school. And that was an experience where I learned from all teachers and benefited from the unique perspectives that they brought. I then spent about 5 years in my professional career working for Lincoln University in Jefferson City. And I saw the impact that teachers had on our students who came from mid-Missouri, who were primarily white, as well as those who came from Kansas City and St. Louis, who, as you can imagine, were oftentimes Black. And now I'm working with Lincoln University, and we have 4 campuses: the Florissant Valley campus, the Merrimack campus, the Forest Park campus, and the Wildwood campus. And each of those has unique demographics. And as Thad mentioned, both of my kids went through the Wilson School and then went on to John Burroughs. I've got one graduate of John Burroughs and one currently in 10th grade. So all of that provides the experience, the lived experience, for me to share with you in this conversation. So I look forward to drilling down as we look at some stereotypes, as we look at the benefits of all children seeing teachers of color. And I hope we also get to talk about some of the unconscious biases that are associated with the stereotypes we see. And so in the chat, one thing I will invite you to do as we begin to dive into this, if you can just put the grade that you remember seeing your first teacher of color in the chat, and then I'll have our moderator, Mr. Diggs, sort of monitor what that number is, and maybe we can revisit that in a few minutes. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. And Keith, we'll follow right there because we were having that conversation a little yesterday. And I grew up in New York City, in Brooklyn to be specific, and went on to school in Long Island, New York at SUNY Stony Brook, and made my way to the Midwest in Urbana-Champaign, and have spent some time going back and forth between the East Coast and most of the time here in the Midwest. And I said to him, and I went back and then I did some additional research. You go to the main source. I went back to my mother and I said, do you remember whether or not I've had a teacher of color? And I did not have a faculty in front of me that was of color until college. And I remember that, and I was like, wow. Even though I spent most of my life really focused on this issue of how do you advance the educational attainment of Black students, diversely speaking, in the United States. Um, and often I expand that conversation to remind us that, there are two major ethnic groups of Blacks in the United States. There are African Americans, and then there's Caribbean Blacks. They tend to be coastal, and then in between is more recent African immigrants. So you have to understand the diversity of the Black American experience. But anyway, today I'm really coming to you, one, as a parent of two boys who just spend their some parts of their formative years here in Missouri, going through John Burroughs, and now my daughter is at Wilson. And so this conversation about the role of independent schools is something I really wanted to join, and I appreciate that inviting me to be a part of this discussion. And I'm hoping that we can center our conversation on the key idea here for me, which is two things. I focus on what happens with Black males currently in my work, and then of course, what is the benefit to all for diversity, as we're speaking about it in terms of producing a more equitable society. And I center on that last point, which is that how do you attend to the historical lie of white supremacy if you do not show the diversity of all in the educational process? And how does the if you only have one ethnic group of faculty and that's all students see, then that also not only skews their perception about how the world came to be and what determines our current state, but also says what are the main ingredients in terms of individuals who contribute to our future state. But that also skews the experiences of faculty as well and staff. So this diversity is not only important because we know it benefits students, improve critical thinking, and more important, you get more innovation, but also it really targets this original sin and this cancerous idea that not all contributes to American society. So it's for those big reasons that it's important for me to be a part of this conversation, and I appreciate the opportunity to do so, and also to highlight the importance of Black male educators, and as your conference and group has centered on as well, and I know the benefits of that, not only to just general students, but also to Black male students, to see that they don't drop out as much. Some of the data shows us. So if we're going to have this conversation on understanding that the biggest benefit might be to how we suggest to our young people and to ourselves what a diverse, heterogeneous society looks like and why all should be involved in the educational process, but also then we'll get into the idea of now how do you support Black male educators in independent schools? Because again, the turnover, what does our numbers tell us? And as Thad and others know, I really like to drill down. So if anyone really has a better understanding of, the percent of Black male educators in independent schools in the region, what has been their experience, their pay, their tenure, then we can have a conversation and say, how can we do better at St. Louis if we set goals collectively for St. Louis, and if those independent schools as well as public schools can help to make that case. And I do think it's important to separate the discussion because of the different capacities sometimes that each schools have to be able to implement ideas. But I think that it's important to have the conversations in both a public school and a private school context. And then I just want to mention that one of the things I became aware of, because I serve in chairing the Diversity and Education Committee for the John Burroughs Board of Trustees, we've been dealing with this issue in terms of our student body representation, but also our faculty and staff. And I think Burroughs have done a great job in the time that I've seen it before I got there. I know that we begin to see great improvements. And then one of those things that came out was, and some of you might be familiar with the equity exchange. And the idea was to create, and I'll put that into the chat, because again, I'm not involved with it anymore, but early on I knew it existed, and the goal was to try to get both independent schools, public schools, charter schools into an exchange that would benefit all those schools in terms ideas that work, from administration to techniques to pedagogy, all those things. So that's a resource I just wanted to bring to this group. So anyway, I'm going to stop and let's have this dialogue, and let's get into it.
Can I follow up on the question of, I make the assumption that having teachers of color focusing on Black history is a benefit to all. And just this past week, we saw a Montessori school in Utah say that they were going to focus on a program about Black history, yet they gave the families an option to opt out of that focus. And many of them opted out, and it became a fiasco. And so I guess the people in my world, the people on this call, we just take it for granted that it is a benefit to all, and everyone benefits from this type of diversity, this type of inclusivity. And to see the reaction of what happened in Utah was, I can't even use the word shocking. It was surprising, but it was disappointing as well.
But Keith,
did you have a reaction to that?
Yeah. So what that speaks to for me, and I brought this up because, again, I'm pushing a little bit in the context where I can push, which is not all people perceive it's a benefit to all. That's the thing. People don't even have the sense of knowledge or even know that, in fact, the baseline thought is that it's not a benefit to all. So to opt out just confirms that that's their perception, that it's not a benefit to all. And our job is to educate. You see, the idea of diversity and equity, when you think about it from a moral point of view, that's good. People say that's the right thing to do. I think that's the right thing to do. But if their knowledge base doesn't confirm for them that it is the right thing to do, that the company's more creative, the innovations and solutions are more creative, the more critical thing, if they don't have the knowledge that is the benefit to do, then that knowledge then overcome their goodwill, or their public-facing goodwill. Let me say it, their public-facing goodwill. And they're gonna make that option. So I'm not surprised by that, but our job is to be able to continue to help people understand, what does the science tell us? What does the bottom line tells us when you have diverse, capable individuals as part of your faculty, as part of your staff, as part of your company. So for me, I try to tell boroughs all the time, it's okay to teach people about the morals of diversity, but you got to teach these students the knowledge, so then when they get into those difficult spaces, like making concrete decisions, is it better for the business, is it better for the organizations, they have some real concrete knowledge that diversity is better, and what happens in innovation if you have diverse thought, diverse perspective, diverse experiences. And then they can be able to see, particularly in the education setting, whether or not now how their textbooks are becoming less diverse. The knowledge, the ideas, the critiques, and all of that, as we talked about before, we don't get here because things are random. We get here because things are non-random. That means this was intentional, not because you have bad people. Either they don't have an understanding, they don't value. And for me, that's why it's important to have this conversation, because it goes to the heart of things, to one of the key institutions that shapes generation after generation, and that's the educational system. If you don't help people understand not only the moral rationale for diversity, but also the practical knowledge that what builds the world is diverse input. And if you don't educate them about that, then they're going to have a very skewed idea that whiteness is the way the world is built alone. And that's what perceived.
Well, I was also upset that they even had to focus on it, because in a perfect world, it's just incorporated in what you do throughout the entire year. And so that should be more of the goal, rather than having a week or a month, or it should be a part of what you do throughout your year and throughout your curriculum. And unfortunately, that's not the case.
No, it's true. It's true. The other side of this, and let me go to Claude Steele for a second, because I understand part of what he says, but then other parts of it is like, it's okay to look the devil in the face, you know, look and deal with the hard issues, have the hard conversations. So sometimes I think this focus is that stereotypes come from the a very well. Don't let me make it too philosophical. The idea of stereotypes come from Americans' original sin to create a caste based on skin color and to reinforce that with violence and then to perpetuate it as if what we have constructed in terms of our society and the inequities is by natural causes. And we know it's unnatural causes that have different groups having different experiences in America. So as educators, I know you know that, and that's how important it is to educate our students and our colleagues about this. But at the same time, you know, those who don't want to talk about it, to recognize that some of the patterns and behaviors that lead to people's understanding of what they think other groups of people are like and why they're that way, those stereotypes, you got to be able to talk about that. So many are challenged by saying, well, it's just culture and then forgetting structure. But at the same time, many are challenged by the idea that they feel for some type of intergroup um, failure and pride, so they don't want to address it. So what's my point? I am really affirmed by this group's framing the work in that way, but also seeing both sides of this, that it's critically important to be able to face those stereotypes and then to have enough knowledge to explain how is it that we got here. And if we continue down this road, um, it obscures our ability to be better, be much more than we are right now as a region, and I keep it in that way. And it obscures our ability to see clearly how to make sure that our children are much better off as a society, and not just in terms of economic measures, but as a society and how we relate to each other. And that remind you know.
Well, when you talk about stereotypes, though, stereotypes often are allowed to grow if you don't have the lived experiences to counteract those stereotypes. So when we talk about when was the first time you had a teacher of color, and for me it was sixth grade, and I honestly I don't remember any after sixth grade through graduation of high school until I got to Morehouse. And so that allowed me to believe that teachers were simply not people of color and were not African American males. The African American males I saw in kindergarten through 12th grade were often the hall monitors, maybe a coach or something like that. I'm curious, Mr. Diggs, as to whether or not you were able to come up. I saw so many chats and responses coming in. Were you able to formulate what you think might be the average for this group?
So with looking at the chat, the data that came from that, the average looks as though from the people that are in the room that their earliest influence of a person of color, a Black educator, was in primary grades. A few people said Head Start. There was a handful that said first, fourth, fifth, sixth. Two said seventh grade. Another individual, two, kindergarten and preschool. So it looks as though from the chat that the majority of individuals that had someone of color as their educator, Black individual, was in the primary grades, like 1 to 6, you know, pre-K to 6, including Head Start. And then there was just, you know, in isolation, you know, someone in grad school, someone in high school, you know, another individual didn't see anyone, especially in their post-secondary career. You know, an individual, Ms. Hinton, she mentioned, you know, I didn't have any Black educators, you know, influence her in Mizzou and UMSL. You know, that was you know, Ms. Hinton. So thank you for that.
It's interesting that it tends to be earlier for this group. However, it's no coincidence that this group is in education. And I don't know if the one or two have something in common, but that would be interesting to see whether or not those influences created a norm to think that this was an opportunity to go in and to continue that tradition. Very interesting.
Keith, I wanted to jump in on that with just my perspective that I went to St. Louis Public, so I had a lot of Black teachers, but I still, you know, in my 40s, my family's from North Africa. So we immigrated here when I was preschool age. So I kind of have that background of being a new American, not speaking English, trying to go to school, you know, having a dad that couldn't sign my field trip form. He could only write in Arabic, things like that. And I still have yet to have any kind of educator in my entire life from North Africa, either Algeria, Tunisia is where we're from. But speaking of the stereotypes, I did finally meet some people from Algeria and Tunisia in college. I was on the East Coast, and they were all the security guards at the dorms. And so it was just, you know, that I didn't, living in St. Louis was really black and white, especially, well, it still is, but 80s and 90s growing up, I was always, what are you? I wasn't black, I wasn't white. So I was this gray area for people. And I still kind of feel that way. So I really take it seriously to be that kind of representation for our students at Wilson, so they can, you know, be more empathetic. I can be really empathetic with those students that we get that are just coming to America and their parents don't know our culture and they don't speak English and they're trying to go to school and it's tricky.
Thanks for sharing that, because that helps to create that sense of belonging and welcoming.
Right. Very, very good points. And I think that idea of stereotypes will probably circle to a lot today. I noticed that there were a couple comments or questions in the chat that I think were kind of interesting that were related to curriculum. And clearly, you know, that again, that there's an area where you pay attention to a diverse faculty because curriculum is influential. There's no doubt. And so that idea of, has it become or remained less diverse, or is it becoming more diverse? You know, I'll share just a little bit here on that piece. You know, one of the things that I think and about the idea of teacher retention and teacher support, one of the reasons that we're involved in the culture work we are involved in at Wilson School is that we believe in an autonomy over curriculum. You know, we have the idea of building a vertical curriculum that has connectivity, and Andrea might tag on to these comments because really she's the one who does this work at our school. But as a teacher, you have the flexibility and the autonomy to bring in things and breathe life into the curriculum. And so I completely agree with the comments about that idea of, you know, Black History Month being celebrated 1 month out of the year. Okay, well, that doesn't mean that the rest of your curriculum is without diversity. You know, if we cannot infuse our curriculum, if we cannot capitalize on making sure that historical events, current events, and then good actions are brought out and part of our curriculum and shared through different lenses, then we're missing out. And so the curriculum we shape is important, and the people who deliver it is important. And the people who deliver it need to be a part of that creation. And I think that that's an important piece as well. I think that leads to teacher retention and satisfaction, which is another component of this whole conversation. You know, if we have a diverse faculty, how do you keep that? So I'll pause again and see if anyone else wants to add to that or share anything different.
Yeah, I would just jump in and thank you for mentioning the curriculum piece too. And I think a lot of that goes back also to professional development. And so having the tools and the resources to find curriculum, develop curriculum, implement curriculum in a way that is successful for all. And I'm just curious, as a way to start some conversation too, if anyone has had or experienced professional development in a way, or maybe hoped for professional development in a way that has been beneficial in developing curriculum or finding curriculum that is successful.
You're asking the group or you're asking us?
Oh, anyone. Yeah, anyone, whether it's something that you've experienced yourself that was a powerful influencer in your choices, or yes, or something that you had hoped for in thinking about a curriculum.
Very good question, because teachers as professionals, we have to be treated as professionals. We're not only here to occupy students' time for the day. We're here to involve them and be a part of helping them to gain knowledge. I'll go back to some things that Sean mentioned about the importance of that knowledge and what you do with that knowledge. It also reminds me, we as educators kind of go to share some philosophical aspects, and again, I believe truly in kind of the Latin roots, even though I'm not a Latin student. I don't claim to be. We have the good fortune, though, of having a Latin program at our school, so I learn a little bit. But my leadership style truly does match with the idea of administration. An administrator, admin, to serve. And in my framework, that feels we have to serve the teachers. We have to make sure that they have what they need and that things are out of their way. And then, to kind of go to the Latin root of education. So we think of to educate a student. The idea of, you could break that down in a couple ways. Educare, which means to train or to mold, or educere, which means to lead out, to bring out. I think certainly there are times where we're doing both as educators, but don't we want to aspire to bring things out in our children? And to do that, that's how we live, it's how we behave, and it's the curriculum we deliver. So I think that's a very powerful question about curriculum and professional development. And I hope that we have an opportunity to I see people putting things in the chat. So I'm going to follow the chat for a moment and let others share.
That, I mean, I think, and seeing the chat, it'll be interesting for folks to document what sort of professional development or training they had, not just on the moral imperative for diversity, but on the knowledge, on the benefit. And I keep making that distinction because I think most of the training is it's important to do, it's important to do, it's important to do. But to be able to sit in a curriculum meeting and defend, as some colleagues might think, it's too much to do. You must have that knowledge to say it benefits, so how it benefits many, to be able to win that argument. And I think sometimes, even with our students, so one of the things I wanted to ask around that curriculum is how do you think about that across the different learning levels, to be able to not only teach the morals of it, but also the benefits of it, which I think you have to have both for it to stay and be sustaining as part of one's development. Yeah? So I was curious how is that being thought of at the Wilson School? Because I do think that my daughter comes home with a lot of books. She's only 5 and she brings home a book every week. And it's often diverse books. So I was like, okay, how they're integrating this, and it's not always, I see books on characters of color and and white students, white characters as well, but it's diverse and it's not just black and white. So anyway.
Very good, very good. But we could certainly share a little bit about our experience, and I'd invite Andrea and Melika to chime in there. The way that we approach curriculum and making sure that diversity also has not only presence but its power. I'd say is that we, as other schools, I'm sure, have our curriculum committees. One thing that we do, though, in our curriculum committees is we involve teachers at every grade level as part of that curriculum committee so that they can talk developmentally and they can go through the whole piece. And we challenge them with questions. Some important work means we have to answer some questions. And if we're going to answer questions, we've got to challenge people with the questions like, in our mission, we say that we value differences in people and points of view. So let's start with, is our curriculum doing that? Are we selecting curriculum that does that? Let's challenge ourselves to think through the lens of our students. Let's look at our population and say, is this student getting what they need because of their background and their culture and their race and their experiences? This student getting what they need? Where are our gaps? Where are our misses? Content is definitely important. We got to think about that content and how it reflects back, your mission and your values and the idea of your population and the power of your people. But I'll stop. Great questions, great conversations.
Oh, go ahead. I would say too, something I've always been impressed with at our school that we've been able to pull off is that, when they are studying things in social studies and getting that content, you don't study it one way. You aren't just given that content. Our teachers are constantly saying, okay, that's one perspective. Can you find 3, 4 other perspectives? Can you find a source for that? Can you interview someone? So the kids are not taking that knowledge from a textbook or the internet or anything and saying that must be the truth. That must be the only way to see this situation. And I think that's really helpful in framing their thinking, for the rest of their lives.
I have a tough question then. If we have a little time, I can't remember how much time we have, but so I'm not, I think it's a fair question, but it's a tough one, Thad and the team. So then as you're thinking about diversity and you're thinking about the school, I know there's heavy conversations when you think about students to admit and the composition of the student body. That means, that could leave some historical legacy parents, worried about positions and intergenerational positions to get their kids in and their families in. But the one I really wanted to ask is about how do you make that tough decision about how to go after and find diverse teachers, and when you might have natural networks that put you in touch with a lot of good teachers, but how do you prioritize in your thinking the diversity of the staff, of the faculty, and then say, how do I find them? So I do think it's a very practical but tough thing to think about when you have so many good teachers and majority of the field is headed by women, but how do you go after males in that context? And then prioritize going after males and defending that when you have access to also other wonderful teachers who are not male. So just a practical thing that I think most administrators have to go through.
It is. That's a real tough practical question, and it's true. And certainly, others on this call, I know Dr. Fields has an expertise in human resources too. But I could share my experience. What we have worked hard to do is make sure that we are reaching candidates to inform them about our school, to invite them to consider an opportunity. And I think that we've been successful in growing our population of diverse applicants, but that growth is too small. It started, quite honestly, with, we would see less than 5% of our applicants would have the idea of person of color or male. Now we're around 20% of our applicants. You have to make sure that you have connections with organizations and things like that. The idea of making the decisions about hiring and bringing people to your school, that practical question is actually, I'd say, almost easy, because once people are in the funnel and once you're talking to people, it becomes a pleasure I'm going to step back for a moment, and I'm going to say that I believe very strongly in what Dr. Diggs and what Dr. Fields did in the flipped job fair, because when we're inviting people to interview, it's our honor that these folks are looking at our school. It's a privilege that we have the opportunity to engage with these educators. And so when it gets to that point, the idea of saying, I picked candidates who are strong, who are passionate, who care about kids, that's easy. That's easy. And we can frame that idea of all the cultural, all the, the racial, the gender aspects, the religious aspects that fit to help add to the diversity of our community. So I think the tough part, to kind of go to the practical side, the tough part is making sure that you're reaching the applicants who can be a part of your community and who can add. The easy part comes after that, because just like on this session today, if we had the pleasure of talking with each individual on here, it would truly be, I'd step away saying, what a privilege that I had 15 minutes, an hour and 15 minutes to talk to this person who can bring so much to a school community. I'd also frame that in the students too. So this is something that I think is a unique opportunity that we have at our school. But I'll be completely upfront in the idea that private schools do have to battle and acknowledge the privilege that's associated, and do have to make sure that that's not a perpetuation of your mission. Our mission is not to continue the social status arrangements of the systematic racism that has existed. Our goal is to provide the opportunity to all of our students, which means we have to have a student population who's going to be representative and diverse. And one of the advantages, I have a public school background as well, and in the schools that I was a part of, I think we all understand how much geography can dictate what the composition is of the school. We have at least the flexibility that our boundary can be different. I mean, I mentioned we have 160 students, but we reach almost 40 zip codes. And that can help us to create that community. It's almost easier for us to reach students in different geography, students with different diversity, than teachers. So right now, that idea of attracting people who really want to inquire, to apply or consider positions is our biggest area of attention. Great question, Sean.
I'm going to ask about also retaining teachers. How do you retain them? A diverse workforce, and we kind of talked about it yesterday, and we talk about pay, we talk about benefits, we also talk about the ability to be comfortable, and then bringing up the issues that they might want to bring up. So meaning a good work environment, and I don't feel ostracized,
Perfect. And I'm actually going to try to hand this one off to Andrea pretty quickly, because quite honestly, it's the reason that she was exactly the right candidate for this role. I'll share to frame it, because in my work in graduate work, and then my belief in part of the philosophy is that teachers really remain for a few reasons. You can put them on one hand. You've got to have the physical and the emotional safety. There's no doubt about that. But you also have to make sure that you have the idea of having autonomy over the curriculum. You have to be a part of the active professional development of the school, and you can feel that you have access to personally grow through that development. You have to have the support of administration. That is completely key. And you just get to that idea, and all of those funnel into that idea belonging. So I'm going to let Andrea talk a little bit about working on that culture as well.
Yeah, and it's a great question. And I think, when thinking about what we all want in a place where we work, when we go to work, what we want to feel at the end of the day, I think plays a large role in our happiness. And, Thad mentioned professional development. So we, are always looking for ways for people to grow and that they have a voice in that. In going out and finding things that interest them in areas that they want to learn more about. So we hear about those, we support those, we find ways to make that happen. And then, as Thad mentioned at the very beginning, we ask that people bring back that learning and share it with the rest of the faculty as well, so that everyone benefits. And then the other piece, I think, is the idea of having a voice, of knowing that your voice matters, and that it's okay, just like we teach the kids that it's okay to try things and to fail. We encourage that in our faculty as well. If you have something that you want to try, I was reading a little bit in the chat about some pilot curriculum or some things that were, perhaps encouraged but not required, but growing here is required. So learning, just like we, require that of our children, we require that of our adults in the building as well. And so looking for those opportunities, supporting those opportunities, but also encouraging one another to try things, to say, oh, that didn't go well, or that was awesome, let's do that again. It's okay to try new things and to decide whether you want to continue down that path, or say, okay, I'm glad I had an opportunity to try that, but we're not going to do that again. So support from colleagues, I think, is key as well, in creating that culture of that environment where you feel supported.
Yeah, I think those are great comments, and just to add maybe a couple other pieces that fall under what Andrea described. So some of the real practical things that we do, regardless of experience, when you join our faculty, you have a partner who you're with, who you're teaching with if you are a homeroom teacher, and so you're working with somebody, you're a part of a teaching team, which is a powerful thing to do. But then you get to select who's going to be your peer, who you're going to spend 2 years with, and each month at least talking about things. So regardless of experience, you're going to have that. The other thing that we really promote is that idea of, as Andrea said, the professional development. We spend 2 to 3 times the national average on professional development. That's on things that we need school-wide, and it's on things that people want for their own personal professional growth. So they're picking development opportunities without the constraint of a budget or a small resource. They can decide that and work hard to find what they need. The idea also of, think about the things that happen in your classroom. We give our teachers a classroom budget, and so how much do you go out of pocket for your classroom expenses? It varies from school to school, but for us, you don't. We give you that budget, and you get what you need to from that. We also, as Andrea said, that idea of creating curriculum and having an empowering voice is an important aspect, and I think that you will that people recognize that our families are really supportive of our teachers, and so these things have worked together, and our numbers, and quite honestly, it is, the numbers are the same for faculty of regardless of gender, regardless of race, regardless of culture. Our experience level at our school is about 21 years, and our average at the school is 16 years. So our retention numbers can't be sliced and diced to say that it looks different across any diverse representation, and they're strong.
You know, I want to go back to this ideal of the curriculum. I think it was Leah who actually put the phrase equitable curriculum in the chat, because I think with the framework of diverse teachers benefiting all students, I think I would bring an understanding of history that is unique to me, unique to being an African-American male. And that flexibility also dovetails well with the Wilson School's ideal of being innovative in the curriculum. I understand there are certain things all teachers must teach, but then there's also an opportunity to infuse whatever perspective you bring into that curriculum also. I think about it, during this pandemic, I've had the opportunity to watch a lot of Netflix. And so my son, who's in 10th grade, I think of him as a very intelligent young man. But I realize there are certain things that he doesn't know about. We were talking a few weeks ago about the death of Hank Aaron, and he didn't know who Hank Aaron was. And I thought, where do you learn about who Hank Aaron is in school? We've seen some other documentaries on Netflix that he didn't know about, that I think not only he should know about, but all students should know who Sam Cooke was. All students should know the life of Miles Davis. All students should know who Quincy Jones is. All students should know the history of James Weldon Johnson. These are things that I think African-American teachers can bring, which all students benefit from. And so when you have the ideal of Congressman James Clyburn right now trying to introduce legislation to make the Negro anthem America's national hymn, not national anthem, but national hymn, that's important for all students to know about, so that you don't get this pushback, so you get this acceptance and we become a more inclusive environment. So just some thoughts on curriculum and innovation and the unique perspective that I think teachers of color bring.
Yeah, and I would go back also to some thinking and what has been shared about diverse groups, regardless of school or any industry. It is, if you're a high functioning group with diversity, you outperform other groups. There's just no two ways about it. And that's really, really powerful. And I know in my experience, I was once I was teaching at a elementary school, public school, and we had an interesting team of teachers. I was teaching first grade, and so much of the faculty diversity actually landed in this first grade team. I was the new teacher. Okay, I was the male. I had a colleague who is Black female who had about 20 years of experience. Colleague, a Black female who was in her third year of teaching. Had a teacher who was Jewish on our team, and we have been in contact for 3 decades, and we were a high functioning team. And yes, we knew that we were diverse because we talked about things, and we had the idea of, tell me your perspective because of your life experience and because of this. So we would name it, but we just enjoyed each other so much that it was really, really powerful. And I actually didn't experience that same piece until I found, and again, I found it at our school at Wilson, and the idea of the power of collaboration and true appreciation and the idea of friendship is really, really strong. And when teams function that way, kids just are the beneficiary of some pretty powerful things.
I would like to add two questions to the conversation, and then one of those powerful things will overcome me as I have to pick up a child from the airport because, you know, they demand it, but it's okay. You know, so I have two things I want to think about and see if hopefully it's relevant for our discussion. One is how do you practically continue the conversation when for some they think absence is progress? What I'm talking about there, you keep talking about this diversity thing, you keep talking about ethnicity, you keep talking about this issue, and for some they think that, you know, so why we have to talk about it, you know? And I say that's when they think absence of a conversation is progress. So you have a board of trustees, you know, public schools have different leadership forces that push them. So how do you maintain this and maintain your ability to persist? Because if you don't talk about it, if it's not part of what we're discussing, regardless of the composition of your team, you know, you as you have argued and others, you're doing a disservice. That's one. And then my second question for us to talk about a little bit is, all right, given all that is wonderful and we know where we want to go, how do you get the workforce to move in that direction? So what's your role in helping to cultivate the workforce? You know, going and finding those Black male educators or working as a region to say, we need more Black educators. We can't just pluck them from other states. How do we grow what we need? How we make it home, you know, that's my thing, homegrown. What's your homegrown solution to producing the capacity and the diverse workforce that you want to have? Because you also have that ability. So how do you function with, not just by yourself as one school, but working with this organization and others to be able to grow that workforce indigenously here in St. Louis? So I want to throw out those two ideas. The persistence of being able to talk about diversity, bringing it up when you might have some who might be giving you pushback. We talk about it too much. And then the other, how do you build that capacity to have that workforce that you want to maintain that diversity over time? So 2 points. Either one is fine. And if I have to duck out, my apologies. I do have to pick up that son at some point.
I'm wondering if there's any of the participants who want to weigh in on that question also. I've got some thoughts, but I want to learn what you all have to say as well.
I'll chime in. I think one of the things we have to be mindful of is some systems don't want that to happen. Some systems are happy the way that they are. And the reality is we have to understand that. And some of us don't want to understand that. We act like it's not real, and it's very real. They want it to be just the way it is. The system is designed the way it was designed. It's not designed for people of color to be successful. It's not designed for people of color to do anything but what we're currently doing now. So those systems like the Wilson School, who are consciously working to change the mindset and change those dynamics, the Wilson School is serious about being the change they want to see and doing the work. So not only are they a model and an example, the Wilson School is willing to help other systems or individuals that want to do the work. We can't force anybody to do the work if they don't want to do the work. We have to continue to move forward, be models and be examples, and be the change that we want to see. And don't get caught up in those individuals who have no interest in doing it. Just because they don't want to do it doesn't mean that we don't need to do it. So continue to do what needs to be done so that we can make sure that we are preparing our students for what's happening in society. We're very backwards, and a lot of people are comfortable being backwards, and they try to make the wrong be right. And so if you get caught up in those systems, then you'll start believing that the wrong is right, because the right is not in the front and center. So you gotta be conscious, you gotta be energetic, you gotta be passionate about doing what's in the best interest of making sure that our students are successful. Because if our students are not successful, we are not successful. And people like living a lie. We don't like to say that, but ooh, they love living a lie.
You know, Dr. Smith, those comments are right on point. I don't know if you can see green Wilson cap behind me, and I see the green background behind you. So green is the color of Wilson. So I could see you fitting in well at Wilson School, and I could see you fitting in well at one of the upcoming professional development opportunities at Wilson to share that message with our faculty.
And oh, hey, I'm William here, Mr. Givens. And I was just listening. I was second that. I was just on the, I'll give you an example. I was just on a pre-screening interview for assistant principal, like an intern assistant principal. And I had gave that question, you know, about, it was posed to us when we did the flip job fair, and I kind of gave that exact same question. What did I said it like, what would people of, you know, people who look like me say about your organization, basically? And she said, well, we don't have any people who look like you. And then I was like, wow. So 100% of their staff is white, and they have about 25% people of color. And then, but just what caused me to pause and take a breath is that when she was talking about, like, you know, hiring people of color or different things like that, she had this consistent giggle, you know, this laughter. I mean, it was so, I don't know, it was weird. You know, it was like, it wasn't any seriousness. Yep, that's true. Nervous laughter. And she was like, well, it's not like we're not trying to, you know, we just, you know, I was just like, why are you laughing? You know, this is a real issue. And I just think they don't think it's a real issue, you know? So and that's what's kind of scary, to be in that space. So yeah, I definitely share those sentiments, Dr. Smith.
Thank you. Anyone else have a comment they want to weigh in on that topic? You know, I understand that those who may not be as supportive as this group is tend to believe that too much conversation centers on these topics. You know, I would love, there are other important topics as a society that we need to grapple with, that we are grappling with. And I would love to see all of the educational institutions with a significant representation of teachers and administrators of color. But that's just not where we are right now. And so we have to keep it being at the center of the agenda as much as possible so that we know that it is important. I think it's just something we have to focus on. And hopefully we will make the curriculum diverse, and hopefully that will grab the attention of future teachers in a way that perhaps it is only slowly doing at this time. But I think society and the events that are going on emphasize the need. And if there is a need, then we've got to show, as institutions, we've got to show the will to change. And so a lot of that comes down to who does the hiring. You know, one of the things I know we do at St. Louis Community College is that we hire about a lot of times by way of committee. You get anywhere from 3 to 8 people together and you hire this committee. But one of the things we've done over the last 2 years is we make sure that that committee has about an hour-long conversation on unconscious bias. And we make sure, because when I look at an application, I tend to think I know something about that person based on the information that I see. One of the first things you see is contact information. So when I see a name, I tend to believe that I know whether or not this applicant is male, female, Black, white, or other. And there is some unconscious bias I associate with that. I tend to look at where the applicant lives. And so even though I am in the diversity, inclusion, and equity work, I still think that someone who lives in Chicago perhaps has more cultural awareness than somebody who lives in Herculaneum, Missouri. That is an assumption that I make. I could totally be wrong, But so many times we make assumptions and we decide who we are going to interview from this pool of candidates, because you simply can't interview everyone. And without having that discussion of unconscious bias, I think we eliminate some people to interview who actually might be more beneficial to our organization. And so I don't know how your institutions hire. I don't know if it's by way of committee. I don't know if you all are spending time to look at unconscious biases. You know, here in St. Louis, we make a tremendous assumption based off of that St. Louis question, what high school did you go to? So we tend to think we know about the socioeconomic background and understanding of a person based on the high school that they attended. And we have to talk about that as a committee and focus on some of the aspects that we need to bring into the organization. And just like Dr. Joe was mentioning, sometimes you have to look the devil in the eye and you have to have serious conversations, and you have to look around and say, okay, our department is made up of 5 white males and 3 white females. What don't we have in this department? And you have to be intentional about bringing what you don't have in your department into your department or your school. And don't apologize for it. There is a need to do it, do it.
That's wonderful. And I know we're getting close to time. Before we kind of summarize, do we have other comments out there or other thoughts?
I think one of the things Dr. Joe touched on earlier, it kind of resonated with me when he was talking about just being homegrown. Like, how do we keep homegrown? So for an example, yesterday, Dr. Diggs talked with our staff, and one of the things he proposed is, or questions he pondered with us is, like, what are you doing as far as the relationships that you're building with students to empower them to become teachers? You know what I mean? To be educators. You know, I grew up in the South. There was a future farmers of America or whatever. What about future educators of America or something like that? You know what I mean? Preparing our young kids that teaching is actually a profession. It's an opportunity. Like, it's something that you can do, not like Dr. Diggs said yesterday, basketball or being a coach. And there's nothing wrong with those things, but you know what I mean? Kids are doctors, lawyers. Kids tend to think of those things, but don't necessarily think about education being an opportunity, especially for our Black males, which is important. I think, what is it, like 2%, 1% in Missouri? Like, we need more. And if we're going to get homegrown, those are some things we have to do. Like, we have to start cultivating, setting up clubs, organizations systematically, you know, doing something different with the system than it already exists.
Great points.
Absolutely. I think there are a couple great comments in the chat too. Definitely evaluation, you know, get to the place where there's power too. I'd piggy that back on that with the support. You know, part of evaluation is that growth and support. So great comments. Thank you. Anyone else have anything before we maybe summarize?
I just wanted to add, and I think it goes to what Mr. Givens said about, you know, maybe sitting in discomfort too, and realizing that that's okay. And we need to sit in that sometimes and still move forward though, even though it feels uncomfortable, it's important. And so I know I have to remind myself of that sometimes too. And that's how we grow and make changes as well. So it's okay to feel uncomfortable too. And I'm sorry about the laughter, because I don't think that that's in any way appropriate, but you know, sometimes people aren't sure what to say or what to do, but I think recognizing that, you know, being uncomfortable is how we get to a better place too. So thank you for sharing that.
You know, there's a slide that I often use in some presentations I do, and it's a slide of Derek Jeter. And the text with the slide is being comfortable being uncomfortable. And that's a message that we try to send over at St. Louis Community College. Derek Jeter, for those of you who were born yesterday, was perhaps one of the two greatest shortstops. I'll also throw Cal Ripken in that discussion, but Derek Jeter was a shortstop for the New York Yankees. And I would say that he was comfortable being uncomfortable. So in that moment, bottom of the ninth, 2 strikes, you need a hit. He knows he's not going to get a hit every time, but he was comfortable embracing that moment. And when we talk about issues related to diversity and inclusion and equity, I think we need to get people to feel comfortable being uncomfortable. You're going to say the wrong thing. Something that you want to say may not come out the right way. You know, you want to really be judged by your heart, not necessarily by the words that you say. But until you are comfortable being uncomfortable and willing to be vulnerable and to say, look, we don't have the diversity that we have. We want it. Help us. And walk that journey together, you're not really going to improve. You have to be comfortable being uncomfortable.
That's well said. You know, this has been a real honor, everybody. Appreciate that that you have participated and given time today and given attention and thoughts and sharing. You know, I'd love to just have a conversation with more of you. It's really powerful. I know that we're gonna turn it over to Dr. Diggs in just a second, and just wanted to just, you know, pull out just a couple points. You know, remember, diverse work groups are just higher producing. They're more functional. They're more powerful. Remember that they break down stereotypes for our kids. You know, students of underrepresented groups just feel more secure in the school culture if that can happen. It can reduce and eliminate the undertones that allow people to buy into damaging stereotypes. You know, whether that be gender, race, culture, any of those aspects. You know, diversity is just additive to thought, and there are so many other powerful aspects of it. And thanks for exploring this topic together. We appreciate it. Dr. Diggs, thanks for giving us this opportunity to partner with you all. You know, it's an honor and a pleasure to really say that we also are part of your work and part of your organization. Thank you for bringing us together, my friend.
Well, thank you. And here's the thing, you know, as the conversation was happening, and you know, looking at the chat and hearing, you know, strong voices of conviction. I tend to write a lot, so my paper is full again with notes. Even when we had Dr. Bettina Love on, you know, prior, you know, again, I'm a writer. And so there's some things that resonated with me from this conversation. And one of those was Miss Andrea. She spoke very eloquently about growing is required, right? For us to be in this profession, to do this work with kids and for their benefit, we must grow as we expect them to grow. And so to use those words, I'm also going to add on, if I may, that's what this looks like. You know, by us being together, learning, or growing. But at some point, we need to put in the action, right? What are we going to do differently based off of this offering of great knowledge and expertise? And so then I want to branch, you know, Ms. Andrea's comments to also, you know, Brother Fuller. He said, hey, we need to be, again, intentional about what we don't have and then do something about it, right? If we're about learning, growing, reading, and doing all of this work, we need to continue to grow, yes, but also have action. And so in the chat, what I hope everyone was able to witness is that there's a flood of resources that jumped in there from everyone that was in the space. Dr. Muhammad was mentioned in great regularity. So I quickly tried to find her talk on YouTube. And so I dropped that in there. So again, in order for us to continue to grow, continue to build, we have to lean on each other, you know, for the resources. Neither one of us have arrived yet, but we're also always on that journey. And so with that being said, I just want to say thank you to the Wilson School. Thank you for each and every one